One Piece is known for having such an expansive world and so many things happening in his world that Oda created. And what makes it even better is that Oda managed to do a lot of planning when it came to the world building and the lore of the series. There is so much foreshadowing in the series that makes you wonder how much Oda really planned his story, even after 1100 chapters. So in this video I'm going to go through 45 crazy foreshadowings in the One Piece manga. And if you want to see more anime analysis videos like this, please like, subscribe, and without further ado, let's get started. So starting off with number 1, we have the first introduction of Rayleigh in chapter 19 of the manga during the Buggy flashback. At the time we didn't know who this character was, but once we get to Sabo Odi hundreds of chapters later, we learn that he's actually the right hand man of Goldie Roger. For number 2, we first hear about Jinbei in chapter 69 during Arlong Park, where we learn that he became a warlord after setting Arlong free. And it's not until the Fisher Tiger flashback where we get the full context of the story between Jinbei and Arlong, and Jinbei later on becomes the latest member of the Straw Hat Pirates. For number 3, we have Dragon saving Luffy in Logtown in chapter 100. At the time, he was a very mysterious man, but then in the post-Enies lobby arc, we learn from Garp that he's actually Luffy's father. For number 4, we have Nami stating that she hates pirates but loves money and tangerines. She says this when she first meets Luffy in Orange Town, but it's not until Arlong Park where we finally learn why she hates pirates so much, and we also know that she loves tangerines because of her mother Bellemere. For number 5, we have Luffy's obsession with wanting a musician on his crew. He first mentions it to Zoro in chapter 8, and then he says it again in chapter 94 after the defeat of Arlong. And after 442 chapters, he finally meets Brook, a musician, and he asks him to join his crew. For number 6, we have the foreshadowing of Luffy being the natural enemy of the gods. In Skypiea, Luffy's rubber body was a direct counter to Enel's lightning, and Enel always thought of himself as a godly figure. Luffy being the direct counter to Enel's lightning foreshadows the fact that those with the will of D are the natural enemy of the gods. For number 7, we have Luffy meeting Laboon, who has been waiting for his crewmates to return for 50 years. The Rumbar Pirates were also briefly shown in the Reverse Mounting arc as well in the flashback. We learn more about this in Thriller Bark when Brook was revealed to be one of the pirates Laboon was waiting for. For number 8, we have the indication of Crocus being a part of Roger's crew. In the last manga panel of chapter 105, he talks about the Straw Hats possibly being the ones they were waiting for in the new Pirates era. Then in Sabo Odi, it was revealed that Crocus actually used to be the ship doctor for the Roger Pirates. It also makes more sense because Crocus was the first character in the series to mention the last island, Raftel. For number 9, we have the mention of Elbaph in Little Garden. In chapter 117 of the manga, the land of Elbaph was briefly mentioned by Dory and Broggy, and Usopp said he wanted to go there one day. Then finally, after 1000 chapters, the Straw Hats have finally gone to Elbaph, despite it being name-dropped so long ago. For number 10, we have Sanji calling himself Mr. Prince to Crocodile in Alabasta, and this foreshadows Sanji being an actual prince from the Vinsmoke family, which is a royal family that once ruled the North Blue. For number 11, we have the first ever mention of Blackbeard and his crew. In chapter 133 during Drum Island, Dalton explains that Drum Island was attacked by 5 pirates, with Blackbeard being one of them, and this was back when he was still a nobody, and we even see their silhouettes when Dalton talks about them. And then in the Jaya arc, we finally see those 5 pirates for the first time, and Blackbeard ended up becoming one of the most important characters in the One Piece story. For number 12, we have Ace giving Luffy his Viva card. At the time, it seems like a regular piece of paper, but then you have Ace saying that this paper would bring them together one day, which foreshadows them seeing each other again at Marineford during Ace's execution. For number 13, we have Zoro using Haki against Mr. One. This fight may have foreshadowed Zoro being able to use Haki, because during his fight with Mr. One, he was able to predict where the rocks would land, which may have been observation Haki being used, but Zoro described it like he could hear the rocks breathing. He also thinks back to the time where his master was talking about how a good swordsman knows when to cut anything, and knows when not to cut anything. This was also the same thing that Hyogoro was talking about in Wano when he was teaching Luffy how to improve his armament Haki. And Zoro was then able to cut Mr. One and beat him in one attack, so Zoro may have unconsciously used armament Haki this early on. For number 14, we have the foreshadowing of Dressrosa. In chapter 234, Doflamingo and Kuma attend the 7 Warlords meeting at Marijua, and Doflamingo says that his business was going well on his island, which is why he got bored and came to the meeting. This may have been the first indication of Doflamingo doing his business over at Dressrosa, with him selling items in the black market and selling his smile fruits to Kaido. And notice how he was very secretive about what type of business he was doing to Sengoku, because the real darkness within Dressrosa was never revealed until after Luffy defeated Doflamingo. For number 15, we have another indication of Sanji being from the Vinsmoke family. In chapter 227, Sanji says he was born in the North Blue after hearing about Nolan the Liar. Usopp gets confused because he thought he was from the East Blue like the rest of them, but then Sanji responds by saying never mind that, and he changes the subject back to talking about Noland. And this might be because Sanji would rather not talk about his family, as they only bring him bad memories. We also get further indication of this in the very next chapter, where Cricket talks about being bullied during his childhood because of his family. He then asks the Straw Hats if they know how that feels, and in the next manga panel it shows Sanji sitting down away from everyone, and he is shown to be the main focus of that manga panel, indicating that Cricket's pain of being bullied throughout his childhood is related to Sanji. For number 16, we have the first appearance of a Clubalterman. During Skypiea in chapter 254, Usopp sees a spirit fixing the Going Merry in the middle of the night, and this foreshadows the fact that the ghostly figure was actually the Clubalterman, which is the spirit of the Going Merry, and is also hinted towards the plotline of the Going Merry being on his last legs in Water 7. For number 17, we have the first ever mention of the Void Sentry, and this was during the end of Alabasta during a conversation between Robin and Cobra, where Robin says that she only joined Crocodile to find the real poneglyph in order to learn more about the Blank Sentry. Cobra asks what he means about the true history, but then Robin decides not to talk more about it, and this made the true history even more mysterious. And ever since then, the Void Sentry has become one of the most important subplots in the One Piece series. For number 18, we have the foreshadowing of the sun god Nika in Skypiea. You have the image of Luffy dancing around the fire in chapter 253, and likes the exact same pose as the sun god Nika. And during the flashback between Noland and Kalgara, the Shanties used to sacrifice their own people to the gods, because they believed that in doing that, they would save them from the illness they were suffering from, and the sun god was mentioned as one of the gods they used to worship at the sacrificial altar. For number 19, we have Shanks using Kangaro's Haki in the very first chapter of One Piece. This was shown when Shanks scared off the Sea King after he told it to leave. It seemed odd that the Sea King would just leave after it just took Shanks' arm, but this may have been the first ever usage of Kangaro's Haki in the series, because we later see Shanks use Kangaro's Haki again when he meets up with Whitebeard. For number 20, we have the first hint of the relationship between Garp and Aokiji. When Aokiji first meets Luffy, he says that Luffy reminds him of Garp, and how he owed him a great debt a long time ago. We learn later on during Egghead that Garp and Aokiji had a student and master relationship back when Aokiji joined the Navy. For number 21, we have the first name drop of Boa Hancock. She was briefly mentioned in chapter 489 at the end of Thriller Bark, when her beauty was being compared to mermaids, and it's not until chapter 516 when she finally makes her first appearance. So for number 22, this one might be a reach, but I think the Galila workers being CP9 was actually foreshadowed early on. In chapter 337 of the manga, Luffy was framed for attacking the iceberg, so the shipwrights and Luffy get into a small fight, and then we see Luffy and Lucci fight each other briefly, and from the way Lucci's face was shown in that panel when he hit Luffy, he had a very serious look on his face, and I think this might have been a hint towards Lucci being one of the main antagonists. So this little fight between them might have actually been a small teaser to Luffy and Lucci having their real fight in Enies lobby. For number 23, we have Luffy's drawing of Frankie before Frankie even joined the crew. This was shown in chapter 323 before the Straw Hats reached Water 7, and Luffy was drawing what type of shipwright he wanted in his crew. And then when we see Frankie reveal himself in chapter 335, he looks similar to Luffy's drawing. For number 24, we have the conversation between Shanks and Whitebeard during post-Enies lobby. This conversation foreshadows the Paramounts War at Marineford, because Shanks pleaded Whitebeard to stop Ace from going after Blackbeard, because he was bad news. And he says that no one will be able to stop the new era from spiraling into chaos if Ace and Blackbeard were to fight against each other. And this is exactly what happens during Marineford, where Ace and Whitebeard die in battle, which shocked the entire world, and Blackbeard became one of the 4 emperors. For number 25, we have the foreshadowing of Luffy losing his crew. This was during a conversation between Luffy and Gecko Moria in Thriller Bark. Moria talks about Luffy not being fit for the new world, and says that he would lose his crew, just like what happened to Gecko Moria long ago. And in the very next arc, Sabaody Archipelago, the arc ends in Luffy losing his crew to Kuma, because they weren't strong enough to face Kizaru in the Pacifista, which is why they needed 2 years to train before reuniting. In number 26, we have the first mention of Wano Country in Thriller Bark. Dr. Hogback explains that his Ryoma corpse came from the Wano Country in the New World, and that he was a swordsman of legend. This was in chapter 450, where Wano was first name dropped, and it's not until chapter 909 where we finally see the Straw Hats get to see the Wano Country. For number 27, we have the first hint of Kuma being from the Revolutionaries. After Zoro takes all of Luffy's pain, Kuma compliments Luffy for having such loyal friends, and then he mentions Dragon, who is the leader of the Revolutionaries. Then during the conversation between Frank and the Straw Hats after they reunited, it was revealed that Kuma told Rayleigh that he was an executive from the Revolutionary Army, and that was why he protected the Thousand Sunny during the 2-year time skip. For number 28, we have the first indication of the Mink and the Tontata tribes. This was shown during the Sabaody arc, where Sanji was looking through the auction list, and if you look at the list closely, the Minks are one of the species included in the list for 700,000 berries. And also just above it, you see that the dwarfs are also included in the list, which might be referring to the Tontata tribe who get introduced in Dressrosa. For number 29, we have the first mention of the smile fruits. Doflamingo talks about them in a conversation with Disco during the auction in Sabaody, where he says that he doesn't care about slave trading anymore, but instead it is the era of the smiles, which refers to him selling smile fruits to Kaido in order to expand his army, which was a huge plot point in the post-timeskip of One Piece. For number 30, we have the foreshadowing of Lola's mom being Big Mom, which I'm sure everyone knows about. Lola says that she is from the New World and that her mom is also a pirate, and then she gives Nami Big Mom's Viva card. Her crewmate also calls Lola's mom an amazing pirate and says that Nami is lucky to have her Viva card, which implies that her mom is a famous pirate in the New World. The Viva card also played an important role with Nami in the Whole Cake Island arc when they were in the seducing woods. For number 31, we have the foreshadowing of Ace's death. This is one of the more clever foreshadowings in One Piece because of how subtle it was. If you go to the front cover of chapter 520 of the One Piece manga, there is an image of the Straw Hats playing cards, and if you look closely at Luffy's cards, he has a card with Brook in his left hand and a card with an Ace of Spades in his right hand. The card with Brook's face might be another meaning for death, and the Ace of Spades might be referring to the character of Ace. And if you look at Luffy's face, it looks oddly familiar to the face that he makes after Ace's death. This image was shown in the cover for chapter 520, which was during Amazon Lily, and that was 54 chapters before Ace's death, which was in chapter 574. For number 32, we have the foreshadowing of Law's connection with Doflamingo. Law was first introduced in Sabaody, where we hear that he is the captain of the Heart Pirates, and this might be a reference to the character Corazon, because Corazon is the Spanish word for heart, just like how the other top executives of the Don Quixote family were named after the suit of cards in Spanish, so Law named his pirate crew after him. And if you look at the Jolly Roger for Law's crew, it shows a smiley face, and it looks similar to the Jolly Roger of the Don Quixote pirates, but instead the smiley face has a crossed line. This shows a connection between the two of them, and it's not until the Punk Hazard arc where we finally learn about Law's previous alliance with Doflamingo and his crew. For number 33, we have the first hints of advanced armament haki in Sabaody. Before the Wano arc, we only knew about armament haki being able to do external damage by using haki to coat your arms and weapons, but that wasn't what happened when Rayleigh removed Kami's collar, or when Sentomaru attacks Luffy. It's not until the Wano arc where we see Hyogoro tease Luffy about advancing his armament haki to the point where it can do internal damage without touching the opponent, which is what Rayleigh and Sentomaru did all those chapters ago. For number 34, we have the foreshadowing of Ace being the son of Goldie Roger. There wasn't much foreshadowing towards this, because I think Oda really wanted to reveal it in a shocking way, but there was one instance that might have indicated this. If you go to chapter 525 of the manga, Garp and Ace have a conversation in Impel Down, and Ace talks about the fact that him and Luffy both have world-class criminal blood flowing in them, and this might have been a hint towards Goldie Roger because he was viewed as a world-class criminal despite him being the Pirate King. Garp also mentions that he spoke to Luffy about his father, but when you see this for the first time, you would assume that he's talking about them both having the same father, but it can also mean that Dragon is only related to Luffy and not the father of Ace. So this was Oda trying to trick the audience before the big reveal. For number 35, we have the foreshadowing of Kinemon wanting to kill Kaido. This was hinted at in Punk Hazard, where Kinemon and Brook defeat one of Vegapond's man-made dragons. After beating up the dragon, Kinemon furiously stomps the dragon, and even Brook was confused on why Kinemon hated the dragon so much. And this foreshadows the plotline of Kaido, who can transform into a dragon, taking over the Wano country and its resources, which made the citizens suffer for 20 years. For number 36, we have the foreshadowing of the relationship between Bonnie and Kuma. This was first hinted at during Marineford, where we find out that Kuma became a pacifista after making a deal with the government, but at the time we didn't know what type of deal he made. But in Egghead, we learn that Kuma became a pacifista to save his daughter Bonnie. And when you go to chapter 565, it cuts to the supernovas watching the live feed of the war, and in one small panel you see Bonnie crying. Then in chapter 581, Bonnie talks about going to the New World to find someone who was at fault, and she seemed to be referring to Vegapunk, because he was the one who turned her father into a weapon with no free will. But at the time, Bonnie didn't know the full truth behind it, so that was why she hated him so much. For number 37, we have what might be the first hint at the character of Imu from the world government. During the post-war, Doflamingo was tasked to assassinate Gekko Moria because he was no longer any use to the world government. Moria asks if Sengoku was the one who sent him, but then Doflamingo corrects him by saying it was actually someone higher up. So this could either refer to the 5 elders, or even Imu, who stands above the 5 elders. And we know that Imu can send orders to kill whoever poses a threat or is rebellious to the world government, because that was what happened to the Lelouch kingdom that got wiped off the map. For number 38, we have the foreshadowing of Luffy being a Zoan-type Devil Fruit user. This is pretty subtle when you first see it, but upon rewatching it after seeing Gear 5, it starts to make sense. When Luffy meets Momonosuke for the first time, Momonosuke asks how he can turn back into a human because he couldn't control his Devil Fruit powers, and then Luffy just replies, "Don't ask me, I'm not a Zoan type." But then when you see Gear 5 for the first time in chapter 1044, we know that Luffy is in fact a Zoan type. For number 39, we have the first ever name drop of Joy Boy. Joy Boy was first name dropped by Robin after reading the poneglyph during Fishman Island in chapter 628, which was around the beginning of the time skip. And Joy Boy has now become one of the most important characters in the whole history of the One Piece world, and we learn later on in Egghead that he was the first ever pirate. For number 40, we have the foreshadowing of Momonosuke and Kinemon being time travelers. This happened in Zou when Momonosuke mentioned that he met Roger's crew when he was younger, but Usopp didn't believe him because Roger died over 20 years ago. But in Wano, it was revealed that Momonosuke, Kinemon and the others were sent 20 years from the past by Toki. For number 41, we have the first mention of Rox D. Zebek. Rox was first name dropped in the Reverie arc in chapter 907 during a conversation between Garp and the Vice Admirals. This conversation also might have hinted towards the God Valley incident when they talked about how Garp became known as the Marine Hero. For number 42, we have the first introduction of Charlotte Pudding. She was first shown in chapter 651 at the end of Fishman Island alongside Big Mom, and it's not until the Whole Cake Island arc where she finally plays an important role in the series. And when Luffy first met her, she was hiding her third eye and was acting innocent, even though when you go to her initial appearance in Fishman Island, we already knew that she had a third eye. So this might have foreshadowed the plot twist about the Big Mom pirates plotting to kill the Vince family at the wedding. For number 43, we have the connection between Zoro and the Shimotsuki clan from Wano. In an SBS, Oda explained Zoro's family tree, and he also explained that his ancestors came to the East Blue from Wano over 50 years ago. But there were some clues before this reveal. The first hint was a romance dawn in Zoro's flashback when he grew up in Shimotsuki village, and the crest they used to wear in the dojo is the family crest of the Shimotsuki family. Then in Thriller Bark, Zoro faces off against his ancestor, Shimotsuki Ryoma, who was a zombie, and then he inherits his Shisui blade. Then in Wano, Zoro encounters and becomes friends with Yasui, who we later find out is part of the Shimotsuki clan. You also have Zoro teaching Momonosuke the word Tsunachi, which was a forbidden word that originally came from the land of Wano, despite Zoro being from the East Blue. And the last clue is from the word Shimotsuki itself. The name translates to Frost Moon, but in the Japanese calendar, Shimotsuki is a traditional name for November, the 11th month, and when you look at Zoro's birthday, he was born on November the 11th. For number 44, we have the foreshadowing of the current 4 Emperors of the Sea, that being Luffy, Blackbeard, Shanks and Buggy. If you go to volume 25 of the One Piece manga, the front cover shows the 4 of them as the main focus of the volume cover. It was kind of random to have those 4 as the main focus during that period, because the Jaya arc was ongoing during the time the volume was released, and Shanks and Buggy had no impact on the events of the Jaya arc. Then when you look at the cover for volume 105 of the manga, the cover looks almost exactly the same as the one from the volume 25 cover, as the 4 of them are still placed in the same positions, but now they are the current 4 Emperors of the Sea. And lastly, for number 45, there is going to be a spoiler warning here, because this reveal has not been shown in the anime version yet, so if you're an anime only, you can click off the video now. So with number 45, we have the foreshadowing of Shanks' twin brother, Shamrock. This was first hinted at in Reverie, where he was seen talking with the 5 elders, but for the longest time, we all thought it was Shanks who met up with the 5 elders, even though he is a pirate. But the way Oda hinted it was very clever, because you can see that the left side of his face was not shown, and we know that Shanks has a scar on his left eye. And every time Shanks is shown in the manga, we always see the left scar on his face. But with the meeting with the 5 elders, only his right side was shown. And this led to a lot of fan theories going around about Shanks having an evil twin brother. Then in the Elbaph arc, it was revealed that Shanks does have a twin brother named Shamrock. So those were 45 foreshadowings in the One Piece series. This wasn't every foreshadowing, there are still some more, but those are the 45 I managed to find. It really is crazy how Oda can foreshadow so many events in this one story. And if you guys enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and thank you so much for watching.